Chapter 531. As if to confirm that his words were no lie, a sudden chilly fragrance wafted up and mingled with the scent that Ydir was about to capture. Although intangible, it insinuated itself unabashedly. Naturally, it was the scent released by Kishir. Ydir felt a sensation as if invisible fingers were tickling his very core. He suppressed a voice that almost involuntarily escaped his lips. No matter how much he bit the inside of his lips and tried to restrain his surging emotions, it was futile. A part of him that had been parched rejoiced as if a drop of refreshing water had finally quenched its thirst. The fragrance that was about to subside abruptly disobeyed its command and rushed towards the familiar scent. Visibly, neither seemed to move, but in the unseen realm, it was a different story altogether. If another awakener with a second gender capable of sensing scents had been present, they would have doubted their senses upon detecting two scents that intermingled so freely they filled the commander's office to overflow. Twisted together like two ferocious beasts in combat, yet quickly blending into one intoxicating scent, each fragrance stirred something deeper within its owner. Ydir, with his uniquely tinted eyes, slowly scanned the man as he rose from his seat. "Shall I come to you, or will you come to me?" The voice, lowered to an almost oppressive level, tenderly offered choices. Amidst his boiling impatience, Ydir turned his gaze towards the closed door of the commander's office. No one would casually enter. Kishir had just finished his paperwork, and Ydir had long completed sorting his correspondence. There was nothing left to do until their departure for the imperial palace. And then, as if contemplating something more for unforeseen situations, the moment he saw Kishir's tilted head and rising red lips as if awaiting an answer, everything came to a halt. Fire surged within his chest. By the time he regained his senses, he was already kissing Kishir, his arms around the man's neck. Kishir entangled their tongues deeply as he pulled Ydir close, his back arching so Ydir could embrace him tightly. Far from feeling restricted, Ydir welcomed the confining arms around him. The moment their bodies met, a tingling sensation surged from their interlocked tongues, flooding his throat and belly. It felt as if the muscles that had been supporting him were all melting away. Ydir's dark eyelashes trembled like a small boat in a violent storm as he strained to look into his partner's face. When he tightened his grip around Kishir's neck, eliciting a faint hum, Kishir swallowed every bit of that sound, ensuring none of it escaped. Their legs, tangled in an unyielding desire to get even closer, wobbled. Yet, even as he seemed about to fall backward, Ydir had no concerns for what might happen next. He knew the arm around his waist would skillfully guide him to prevent any fall or injury. As expected, their bodies, swaying and spinning, managed to tumble onto the sofa without parting their lips or suffering any harm. Only then, as if sinking into water, did their lips finally separate with a plush sensation. There was no music, but for some reason, it felt like those times we practiced dancing, doesn't it? Ydir lay sprawled on top of Kishir, panting for breath. Kishir sunk deep into the cushioned sofa, also mixed laughter with his heavy breathing. The absurd sight of a man lying atop another in such disarray should have been comical, but Ydir couldn't take his eyes off Kishir's golden locks and crumpled clothes sprawled on the sofa. It was a beautiful sight. Even the few rays of sunlight pouring over him seemed to exist solely to make him look even more beautiful and complete. An absurd thought, but one that couldn't be helped. Ydir instinctively reached for his face, but halted when his arm got tangled in the draping folds of his outer garment. Looking down, he realized he was no less disheveled than Kishir. As Ydir involuntarily furrowed his brow, Kishir reached out and pulled off the entangled garment. Hearing the sound of the black fabric fall lifelessly, Ydir finally touched his face as he had wanted. He gingerly caressed Kishir's cheek with his rough fingertips, and the man tilted his head slightly as if leaning into it. He let out a breath that seemed to come from a deep place within, and his eyes were not much different from either's. The eyes, aflame with an entranced heat, yet not knowing what to do with the object of their desire, called out Yudhir's name. Yudhir, tat tat tat. The warmth felt against his palm soon turned into another kiss. The electrifying first brush of their lips became a searing imprint by the second, and by the third, it was as fluid as water on the skin, leaving them both speechless. As if the utterance of his name had pulled the trigger on something, Yudhir collapsed into Kishir's arms. It was as though the man had been waiting, as he took Yudhir in his arms and kissed his cheeks and neck. The intensified scent enveloped them, and in response, sweat broke out. Yudhir moaned as he hungrily explored the man while simultaneously being explored. His entire being seemed to open up toward him. He had no way to stop the cascade of sensations flooding him from within. It was as if he were standing at the edge of a massive waterfall. Even the heat he felt below his waist couldn't stop him. Yudhir willingly spread his legs, pulling Kishir closer through the opening of their clothes. Though still separated by cloth, the intense contact momentarily blurred his vision. Yudhir recognized the sensation. It was the same pleasure that had taken root in his body throughout their vacation, becoming as familiar as another hand or foot. With swift and rough movements, he cleared the obstacles between them. Both of them were hard to the touch, as if poised for a climax. Despite the illusion that Kishir's was too large for Yudhir's not-so-small hand, the moment he touched it, it twitched noticeably, and unbelievably, it grew even larger. The moment they touched, Kishir, who had been pressing his lips to Yudhir's rapidly beating chest, suddenly let out a feral breath and tensed his body. Hands that had been wrapping tightly around Yudhir's waist moved under the fabric. Even without touching the same area, the intention behind each caress was unmistakable as their hands continued to explore. He gripped his sweat-soaked waist and back, and every time he caressed him, Yudhir flinched reflexively, moaning at the sensation of the touch. Their lower bodies pressed together, rubbed against each other, offering pleasure. This repeated motion soon became a familiar rhythm. Yudhir, having forgotten even the thought of removing his clothes, continued to sway his body, following the movement of the hands caressing him. The liquid that flowed from the front soaked his underwear, and the two intimate parts made a continuous, slippery, and luscious sound. It wasn't just the front that was wet. Inside, where he knew the sensations that would follow, it felt as if sweat was oozing out, accompanied by a feeling of yearning, contracting and relaxing repeatedly. Yudhir moaned, feeling as if his head was about to explode, and buried his forehead in Kishir's shoulder. As he gritted his teeth and rubbed his waist, the hand that had been caressing his back pressed gently somewhere between his spine and wing bone. The spot had always been one where Yudhir reacted strongly ever since they had been intimate. The moment it was pressed by the fingertip, an intense sensation erupted, making his body convulse uncontrollably. Gasping for breath, Yudhir bit down on Kishir's neck. An illusion of burning overtook his vision as something hot exploded within him.